It was Gandhi who once called poverty the worst form of violence, the exact opposite of peace in the cities. Why did he say that? Let's take a look at a video that might help us to begin to understand. Our narrator is scientist Franz de Waal, and he's going to walk us through a study on fairness.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more, because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs, and with birds, and with chimpanzees, but with Sarah Brosnan we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group. They know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now, if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, it's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber, and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
Economic unfairness, with poverty as its worst expression. It is offensive at a core animal level. That is what the video suggests about capuchin monkeys. It's the same with dogs, birds, chimpanzees. Deep in our animal core, there is a demand for fairness. And if it is not met, something breaks. Something within us breaks. Something between us breaks. That is where the violence comes in. What happens to the capuchin monkey is that he flings the piece of cucumber back at the experimenter. He wants what that other monkey's getting, which is better, sweeter, a grape. He wants it. It's unfair that he is not getting it. He reaches out through a hole in that plexiglass cage and begs with an open hand. He grabs hold of that cage with two hands, and he wants to shake it to kingdom come. It is the opposite of peace. And then what happens? What happens to the poor monkey's fight when time after time it is clear that no matter how hard he begs, no matter how hard he shakes that cage, it's not going to shatter. The video doesn't show that part. It doesn't show how he learns that despite his animal rage, the hunger in his belly does not subside, and he must eat, he must accept that cucumber, which is now humiliating to him. He learns that unless he gets back to work doing that thing he does with the rocks, he won't get any food. He's got to get with the system, even as the system crushes his self-esteem. This is the long-term picture of things. And the 2-minute video shows none of that. Now, perhaps I am ascribing too much humanity to that capuchin monkey, but I hope you see that the distance between monkey and human is really not that far at all. The poem by Langston Hughes, entitled What Happens to a Dream Deferred. It's so good. It just says it all. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotting meat, or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? The dream is a dream of fairness, which goes down so deep that even our animal relatives carry it. It is deep in the heart of life, this dream. And when it is deferred, when it is denied, for almost 30% of children living in Georgia, it's been denied from birth. The choices that their parents have made might have been every bit as bad as blowhards like Bill O'Reilly or Rush Limbaugh. They love to go on and on about that. Maybe. But these 30% of Georgia's children are innocent. From the first, what they have known is deprivation. They don't know anything else. It is not their fault. UUCA congregant Ron Davis tells a story about one of these children whom he and his wife Beth met through our partnership with Hope Hill Elementary School in the old 4th Ward. Ethan was a 2nd grader when we met him a while back, says Ron. I soon discovered that his method of dealing with difficult tasks was to withdraw into a shell, refuse to come out. Not a strategy likely to lead to success in life. Over the years, Beth and I knew Ethan. We never learned what his story was or why he was so troubled. We did learn that he lived with his aunt, a young, well-dressed woman. We never knew what happened to his father or mother or grandparents. Ron goes on to say, during Ethan's 3rd grade year, Beth and I worked with him and his cousin. She did math and I did the language arts. On good days, Ethan could handle educational games, provided the vocabulary was at a 1st grade level. On bad days, he would go into a sulk. He'd have to be sent back to class early because nothing was being accomplished. One day I tried to work with a globe to talk about some geographical concepts, but he forcefully rejected this idea, claiming that he was never going to go anywhere. I'm never going to go anywhere. This dream is deferred. Something within has broken. This is violence internalized, turned against oneself. In 1967, Dr. King said, there are 40 million poor people here, and one day we must ask the question, why are there 40 million poor people in America? And he said, when you begin to ask that question, you are raising questions about the economic system. And I am simply saying that more and more we've got to begin to ask questions about the whole of society. We are called upon to help the discouraged beggars in life's marketplace. But one day we must come to see that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. It means that questions must be raised. Here's a good question. As we see in Flint, Michigan, so we see it in Atlanta. Environmental pollution that the poor suffer from the most. Poison in the water, poison in the ground, poison in the air. Questions must be raised. How is it that Georgia has the lowest minimum wage rate in all of the United States? It is $5.15 an hour. Did you know that? Lowest in the country. How are people working these jobs expected to pay for the necessaries of life? Rent should be, if you are renting, rent should be no more than 30% of your income, but for the poor, it can be more than 70%. Imagine after having paid your rent, you have only $2.19 a day for the rest of the month. Questions must be raised. How about this one? How is it that suburban social services agencies in Metro Atlanta receive just $1.73 in grants per person annually compared to the $65.98 given to their inner city counterparts? This, when 87% of Atlanta's poor people live in the suburbs. You heard that right. Does that surprise you? Oh, yeah. Yeah. The quick reason for this has to do with a lack of quality public transportation or simple lack of access to that transportation. The suburban poor cannot get to the job opportunities which are closer to downtown, or it may take them 2 hours, or just questions must be raised. How about the questions that Barbara Ehrenreich provokes in an article in The Atlantic entitled, "It is Expensive to be Poor"? She writes, "When I worked on my book, Nickel and Dimed, on not getting by in America, I took jobs as a waitress, a nursing home aide, a hotel housekeeper, a Walmart associate, and a maid with a house cleaning service. I did not choose these jobs because they were low paying. I chose them because these are the entry-level jobs most readily available to women. What I discovered was that in so many ways, these jobs are a trap. They pay so little, you cannot accumulate even a couple $100 to help you make a transition to a better paying job. They often give you no control over your work schedule, making it impossible to arrange for childcare or to take a second job. And in many of these jobs, these young women, they soon begin to experience physical deterioration, especially knee and back problems. And that can bring a painful end to their work life." Ehrenreich goes on to say, "I was also dismayed to find out that in some ways it is actually more expensive to be poor than not poor. If you cannot afford the first month's rent and security deposit you need in order to rent an apartment, you may get stuck in an overpriced residential motel. If you don't have a kitchen or a refrigerator and a microwave, you will find yourself falling back on convenience store food, which, in addition to being extremely unhealthy, is also alarmingly overpriced. If you need a loan, as most poor people eventually do, you will end up paying an interest rate many times more than what an affluent borrower would be charged. To be poor, especially with children to support and take care of, it is a perpetual high-wire act." Listen to this. This is the reality of poverty, which results from a cascade of catch-22 situations, from synergies of multiple forms of adversity, from low pay, high rents, ignorance about where the poor actually are, unavailable or inadequate public transportation, jobs that prevent you from getting anything better, how it's literally more expensive to be poor, and on and on and on. This is not peace. Poverty is bleak and cuts off your long-term brain, says an adult mired in it. It is why you see people with 4 different baby daddies instead of just one. You grab a bit of connection wherever you can to survive. You have no idea how strong the pull is to feel worthwhile. It's more basic than food. You go to these people who make you feel lovely for an hour or less. That one time, that is all you get. You're probably not compatible with them for anything long term, but right this minute, they can make you feel powerful and whole. It does not matter what will happen in a month. Whatever happens in a month will probably just be as indifferent as what is happening with you right now, today or last week. None of it matters. We don't plan long term, because if we do, we'll just get our hearts broken. It's best not to hope. You just get you take what you can get as you spot it. This adult mired in poverty goes on to say, I am not asking for sympathy. I am just trying to explain on a human level how it is that people make what look like from the outside really bad decisions. This is what our lives are like. And here are our defense mechanisms. Here is why we think differently. It is certainly self-defeating, but it is safer. Poverty is the worst form of violence. It is done to you. You do it to yourself. Something gets broken within. But now I want us to go back to the video again. We've spent quite a bit of time exploring what that enraged capuchin monkey who only got the cucumber represents. But what about the other monkey who got the grape? Let's not forget about him. And what I noticed, and maybe what you might have noticed, was that he paid not one iota of attention to his brother monkey rattling. Did you notice that? Rattling his cage. His brother could have been in a completely other universe, different world. He was in his world. He got his grape. He ate it. Then he got back to his job of picking up a rock and giving it to the experimenter, and then he got paid a grape again, and then he went back to work, and then he got his paycheck, and then back to work, and then he got his paycheck, and then back to work. The tight little loop of his little world. And within that little world, smugness, which in his human cousins translates to the full-blown conviction that people alone create their good fortune. That if people study hard, they work long hours, they obey the law, then a grape is coming their way. Simple as that. Conversely, if bad stuff happens to others, if others get a cucumber and not a grape, well, it is their own fault. How about a little bit of personal responsibility around here? Philosophically, the view that best supports this conviction is called laissez-faire capitalism. People should be free to get ahead or fall behind without any governmental assistance or interference. And yes, this may lead to rampant inequality. Yes, some monkeys are going to be getting those grapes and other monkeys are going to keep on getting stuck with those stupid pieces of cucumber. But hey, that's the way the world works. People have a right to whatever they have legitimately earned through their hard work. If I have been working hard all day, picking up stones, getting paid a grape, and that grape is mine, that grape's mine, it is unjust that any piece of it, no matter how small, should be taken away and redistributed. Therefore, says the philosopher of the people who get grapes, John Hospers, government is the most dangerous institution known to man. That's what he says. Now, I want no misunderstandings here. I am not saying that people who work hard for their grapes shouldn't enjoy their grapes, shouldn't feel attached to their grapes. I feel attached to my grapes, right? Now, you could really take that out of context, but whatever. It's like, I want my grapes, right? Now, I'm also not saying that there's something flawed with the ethic of working hard and taking responsibility. I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. But what I am saying is that this whole point of view, this John Hosper's point of view, assumes that people are all equal in their advantages and disadvantages. And this really is not the way the real world works. We know this. Some people are lucky, other people are not lucky. Some people win the ovarian lottery. They're born into secure, safe, loving home situations, and they are well on their way to those grapes. And others are born into environments that are so deeply impoverished that early on in their lives, chronic stress disorder sets in, which manifests in their behavior as impulsivity, forgetting easily, blurting things out, acting before asking permission, all of which the classroom teacher interprets as malicious acting out. And already this child is well on his way to cucumbers. The way of the real world is unfair and undeserved inequality, just like this. And therefore, to take no responsibility for redressing these inequalities is wrong. To focus on just your grape and yourself is wrong. Not to bat an eye as you see evil, as you pass by a scene of misery, it is wrong. It means that something is broken inside you as well. You might have heard about the work of Princeton University psychology professor Susan Fisk. She has found that when research subjects are hooked up to neuroimaging machines, when they're hooked up like that and they're looking at photos of the poor and the homeless, their brains often react as if they are seeing things and not people. That's how those brains react. And no wonder the response to poverty is so often not sympathy, but utter revulsion. Rush Limbaugh and Bill O'Reilly style. And no wonder the response to government programs, welfare programs that fall short of perfection, those responses are so ruthless. Because think about the mentality here. The mentality is we've just wasted a bunch of our hard-earned money on things, not people. The monkey with the grape loves to criticize and second guess. Violence of judgmentalism. Writer Tessie McMillan Cottom nails it on the head. At the heart of all the incredulous statements about the poor decisions that poor people make is a belief that we would never be like them. We would know better. We would know to save our money, eschew status symbols, cut coupons, practice puritanical sacrifice, to amass $1 million. Books about the modest lives of the rich like us tell us how to drive Buicks instead of BMWs. What we forget, if we even knew, is that what we know now about status and wealth creation and sacrifice, it is predicated on who we are, i.e. not poor. If you change the conditions of your not poor status, you change everything about yourself as a result of that. You have no idea what you would do if you were poor unless you were poor. Then and only then will you understand. That's what we're doing today. That's what we're trying to understand, trying to bring a deeper compassion to this issue than ever before, trying to heal what is broken. 50 years ago, President Lyndon Johnson stood in the Capitol on January 8, 1964, and in his first State of the Union address, committed the nation to a war on poverty. We shall not rest until this war is won, he said. The richest nation on earth can afford to win it. We cannot afford to lose it. And I am struck by what one of the fighters in this war says. He's been a part of it for 40 years. Bill Bowling, founder and executive director of the Atlanta Food Bank until 2015. He says, it's never really felt like a war to me. There was never a feeling that our country or local communities would use all the resources necessary to win this war. I served for 4 years in the armed forces, some of them in Vietnam. That war felt different. There was a tenacity, a sense of duty that soldiers still experience when they go to war. The war on poverty has felt more conflicted. Instead of putting all our energy in fighting poverty, we've spent it arguing over facts, struggling with dysfunctional systems, fighting cynicism. That's Bill Bowling, and he's dead on. President Johnson called for an all-out war, but it's not really ever been fought in that way. Like, for example, we fought World War II. Never. The sense of tenacity and duty in all citizens has not been there. It is true, some welfare schemes have been ill-conceived, absolutely, but in the history of warfare, you see all sorts of crazy weapons and crazy ideas and stupid equipment. It does not mean you just give up and let the enemy win. You double down and you get smarter. You try harder. And meanwhile, the reality still stands. The monkey who gets the cucumber, the monkey who gets the grape, the experimental setup, which is intrinsically violent. Those monkeys are us. We are just like them. Atlanta, has, as you heard earlier, the worst economic inequality of the 50 largest states in these United States. 20% of the people living in Georgia are food insecure, meaning they don't know where they're going to get their next meal. They don't always know that. 28.8% of Georgia children living in food insecure households will go to school. They will be expected to concentrate so they can pass important tests that are going to determine their future, and their bellies are just screaming with hunger. They can't concentrate. If you are poor, you have to figure out how to make just $250 last, because that's the average amount of food stamps that families get. That is $3.12 per meal for the entire family for a month. Where do we go from here? Bill Bowling says, I still have hope. Fighting poverty has been a journey, rewarding to those who give themselves to service, insightful for those who care to learn about the systemic issues, transformational for those who are willing to overcome prejudices. And then, of course, there's the Bill Bowlings in this place, the groups and activities already devoted to the fight against poverty. You remember Ron and Beth Davis and their work with that young man, Ethan, who said, I am never going to go anywhere. Beth kept on working with Ethan throughout the 4th and 5th grades. Gradually, he came out of his shell. He learned behaviors that were more productive and cooperative. Ron says, I last encountered him at Operation Peace during the summer after the 5th grade. One day, a staff member gave the students a vocabulary exercise, and not surprisingly, Ethan didn't know some of the words. He politely beckoned me over, asked me what those words meant. That is progress, Ron says. Progress one person at a time. Progress I want to emphasize, which is possible whatever your particular social justice passion happens to be. Poverty is an overarching focus. You can help heal it through your LGBTQ activism, your peacemaking activism, your environmental activism, your legislative activism, your anti-racism, anti-oppression, multiculturalism, activism, and on and on. Poverty intersects them all. And more about this during that sermon series that John mentioned a little bit ago, a couple weeks from now. Taking on this overarching focus challenges us then to become more creative in our social justice work than we ever have before, because different passions that we bring to the table, they're going to be needing to talk to each other. And that's going to require creativity. If poverty becomes our unifying focus, no member or friend of UUCA could ever say again, I yearn for traction, for unity of focus. I don't want us to get lost in options or all scattershot. No one will ever be able to say that again. Let's get found. Let's not be lost anymore. Let's get found. There's nothing scattershot about how we find ourselves in that terrible little experiment where some people get grapes and others get cucumbers. Nothing scattershot about the brokenness at the core. Nothing scattershot at all. Gandhi called poverty the worst form of violence. How proud we could be of UUCA to know that we chose it as our fundamental focus for how to heal this world, And we're going to do this with the best form of collaborative congregational action. How proud we could be. Amen.